here in verse 8, y'all see verse 8? Well, okay, here in verse 7, at the end, it says, I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. Saul wanted to kill David many, many times.
Yep.
And the reason he wanted to kill him is because, one, David was a young boy, and he killed the Philistine. He killed the giant. And then people looked more upon David than they did Saul. They felt like Saul only killed 1,000 people, but David killed 10,000. That's how the people was bragging about him.
Yeah.
So in verse 8 it says, David, this is what I did for you. I gave you your master's house. I gave you your master's wife. I gave you his house. I gave you Judah. I gave you Israel. How much do you want? And that's us today. God give us a 10, guess what?
Oh my God.
When God give you a 10, what you want?
20.
Thank you. And then if God give you a 20,
40.
Lord, Lord, if you would have just gave me $5 more,
7 times 7, Lord.
Thank you. And then that's not enough,
Nah,
So he said, I gave you everything. And then it says, verse 9, it says, wherefore thou hast despised the commandment of the Lord. I gave you everything, David. Many times it says that Saul was chasing after David. That was one time he threw a javelin at him to kill him. But his son told him, he said, my daddy gonna try to kill you. You need to go hide. So God is asking him, he said, why did you go against what I say? He said, why did you do this evil in my sight? Now, we think a lot of times when we do stuff, God is not
Please.
He ain't looking.
He ain't looking.
And we think he ain't looking. But one thing about God,
He knows.
Everything. Okay? Now, he said in verse 9, he said, then you had Uriah killed, the Hittite, you had him killed by sword to take his wife. Because, Lord have mercy, let me start at the beginning. Verse 1, okay? The prophet, like I said, back then, a king always had somebody to come and tell him what God tells him to say. And so here, Nathan is talking. Nathan is talking to King David. Now remember, Nathan is under David. David is above Nathan. Okay, and he tells him this story. And he said there was 2 men, and one was rich and one was poor. Okay, and it says in verse 2, he said the rich man had a whole bunch of ox, cows, chickens, dogs. He had everything. But then it says in verse 3, the poor man didn't have nothing. All he had was one little bitty lamb, a little bitty girl lamb, and it was a baby lamb. Okay, but remember, the rich man had a whole bunch of everything. He didn't have just one. He had a whole bunch. He had a farm. He had everything. But the poor man, he had one girl lamb, and it was a baby. And he said he bought it. He paid for it. Then he fed it. He done everything he could with it. And then he said he grew up with it. And then even with his children, he said, but it did eat his meat. Everything that they ate, the lamb ate. And then he said everything that they drank, the lamb drank. And then he said he would hold the lamb in his arms. Okay? And he treated the lamb like he was a child. Now in verse 4 it says, and then what happens is somebody came to visit the rich man. And when he came to visit the rich man, what the custom was back then, if somebody came to visit you, you would cook for them. So what happened is that in verse 4 it says that the rich man who had authority over the poor man, and y'all know money talk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what happens is that the rich man, he goes to the poor man's house and he take his one lamb. And he cooked him for the man that was coming to visit. And so after Nathan is explaining this to David, David hears the whole story. And when David hears the whole story about how the rich man had too many sheep, too many goats, too many horses, too many whatever, but he takes this man one and only, now David mad. Now, that would be just like today us going to President Biden saying, this is what happened to me. David was the king of all. So when he goes to him and he tells him what happened, now David is plumb mad. He ain't just mad, he plumb mad. And so now this is what happens. In verse 5 it says David's anger was kindled against the man. He ready to go tear that man's head off. Okay? Now it says that he said, and he said to Nathan, this is David's reply to the prophet. He said, as the Lord liveth, and we know God was alive, he said, the man that done this thing gonna die. Now, can you imagine him making this proclamation about this rich man, how the rich man finna die? Okay, now, in verse 60, he said, and he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing, he had no pity. What David is saying, because the rich man did something so awful. Understand one thing, y'all. David was a what before he became a king?
He was a shepherd.
He was a shepherd. So he understood about sheep. Yeah. So that's why Nathan told the story in the form of a sheep, because David had more understanding about a sheep than he would have if he'd have said, well, you know what, it was a cow or it was a donkey. So he understood more about being a shepherd. And see, Psalms 23 tells us that the Lord is mine and I shall not want. And the reason that they explain it that way is because David was a person who watched the sheep, and he understood that sometimes you got to leave the 99 sheep and go find that one that done wandered off somewhere and come back and get it. Then sometimes the wolves at night, you got to stay in the field with the sheep. So David understood about a sheep. That's why Nathan explained it to him in the form of it was a sheep. So now David saying he gonna die. Now verse 7, Nathan said to David, guess what, David? What y'all look at verse 7. What verse 7 say?
David said to David, you are the man.
Okay, what that mean? Wait a minute, what that mean? He said, I'm talking about a rich man and I'm talking about a poor man. Well, guess who I'm talking about, David? I'm talking about you. He said, David, that's you. You the one I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay? And it says, thus said the Lord of Israel. This is what Nathan told him. He said, I gave you everything, David. And now this woman was taking a bath. And because she was under you, she couldn't say, no, I don't want to be with you. He was the king. If President Biden walked in here today and said, I need somebody to just walk with me when I walk, guess what we can tell him? Go on and tell him that, see what's going to happen to you. So he was king. That means he could tell anybody anything. They had to do it. Or you could suffer the consequence of death. Okay? And then, so he told him, he said, David, I done gave you everything. He said in verse 9, he said, but this is the problem, David. You went against what I said. Now, I done gave you Saul's women. I done gave you Saul's harem. And y'all remember how many wives David had?
Like 300.
More than enough. And then God said, I even gave you the man that hated you. I gave you his wives. Thank you.
And their concubines.
Thank you. So how many women do you need? So he didn't go to battle this day. So since he didn't go to battle, he saw one woman. And that one woman caused him to do something that made God angry. Lord have mercy. Okay? David's action was blatant. He intentionally did what he did. Okay? Uriah was a mighty warrior. He was a loyal person in David's army. Now what happened is when he saw Bathsheba, he decided, well, she looked good. What about them other 300 women you got? What about the other 400 women you got? What about the other 500 women you got? One? One. Okay. See, David's sin was before God. See, David was a person, God called David what?
A man after my own heart.
A man after God's own heart. That's who God called David. A man after my heart. Somebody who, when you do wrong, you'll come back and you'll apologize.
He's quick to say,
Quick
man,
to say,
I
Lord,
did that.
I did it, Lord. And so,
He quick.
why didn't he say that before he committed that? Why couldn't he just look at the woman and say, oh, she pretty, but she don't look good as them other 900 women I got around here? Why didn't he say that? Let's move on. I ain't gonna talk. Okay, verse 13. It says, I have sinned against the Lord. He's apologizing. Okay, y'all see verse 13? And Nathan said unto David, the Lord also hath put thy sin away, but thou shalt not die. God said to the prophet, he said, you did something wrong. You have apologized. But guess what? You still gonna have to pay. You still got to pay.
What did it say? The Lord said David still have to pay?
Yes, ma'am.
What did it say? What does this mean? Thou shalt not die.
You ain't gonna die, but I'm gonna help you out. Okay? Verse 14. It said, howbeit, because this deed thou hast given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme. Blaspheme. Talk bad about God. Say God ain't a righteous God.
Mm-hmm.
But see, the reason that they upset about what's going on with David is because David is king. Y'all know how we did about Princess Diana? Oh, she's so, and she, oh, they shouldn't treat her like that. Oh, she's so, look how kind she is. She want to hold the little African babies. Okay, y'all didn't say that about her. But anyway, it says, this is what God's punishment was for David having Bathsheba's husband killed. He said, because you drew blood, now I'm going to draw blood. Look at verse 14 at the end. He said, Bathsheba got pregnant. He said, but the child also that is born unto you, it's going to die.
His first
All
child died.
because of sin.
The
Now,
first-
another thing. Do y'all notice here anywhere in the scripture where, look at verse 15. It says, and Nathan departed unto his house, and the Lord struck the child that was with whose wife? Uriah's wife. He didn't say David's wife. And see, back then, if your husband died, you could go be with the brother. You could go be with the cousin. You could be with whoever. But here, even after Uriah died, God still don't consider her David's wife. You know why? It was sin at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And God was not pleased.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, he said, God struck, and the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bare unto David, and it was very sick, so the baby died. All because David's wandering eye. He saw Bathsheba. He had other women, plenty of women, good-looking women, ugly women, fast women, tall women. And see, back then, if you had a harem, what the people would do, y'all seen on them old-timey movies where the women, all the single women, they standing in the pond, and they got their hair all up on top of their head, and they standing around and they laughing, but they walking around in the water. Well, what they did back then, they would take the women and they would put them in oils and bath salt and milk and different, so their skin would smell good. So whenever they were with the king or whoever, mostly the king, then they would smell good. They wouldn't have an offensive smell. See, people back then prepared themselves for things. Even, what's her name, Deborah, when she, was it Deborah? Yeah, when she went before the king. They prepared her. They washed her. They put her in goat's milk so her body would be cleansed. And so we don't do stuff like that today. But back then, that's what people did. They prepared themselves for what was to take place. But what happened here is David sinned against God and God himself. I need somebody to read this scripture for me. Somebody turn to Exodus.
So why did he look for Exodus?
No, not Exodus. Excuse me.
Why did he look for Exodus?
No.
Whether David was after God's own heart.
Yeah, he was a man after God's own heart. Yeah.
So what I mean, how? I mean,
Because every time he said something wrong, he said, Lord, forgive me. Please forgive me, Lord, I'm sorry.
Every time he did something wrong.
Every time.
That
Every
means
time.
he after his own heart.
Yeah.
In other words, he wanted God to love him. Okay.
I did everything I could, God, to make you love me. Sure did. Yes, ma'am. Somebody turn to Psalms 51.
That's it.
Oh. Have mercy upon me, O God,
Keep going.
according to thy loving kindness,
Uh-huh.
according unto the multitude of thy tender mercies. Blot out my transgression.
But you just
Keep
explained.
going.
Created me. You just explained.
Psalms 51.
I haven't memorized the whole chapter yet.
That's all right. Psalms 51. 1 through 4.
Have mercy.
Okay, this is David talking. Go ahead.
Have mercy upon me, O God.
Have mercy upon me, God. This is the result of him sleeping with Uriah's wife, with Bathsheba. He's saying, Lord, have mercy on me. Go.
According to thy loving kindness.
Okay, God, you know I do everything I can to please you. So, Lord, forgive me. Go.
According unto the multitude of thine tender mercies.
Tender mercy. God, I know you love me. You know why? Because of what happened to me, God. All the years that I've been walking with you, talking with you, you've been tender toward me. Because I know I've made some mistakes. Go.
Blot out my
He
transgressions.
said, take them, Lord, and erase them. Don't let them be there no more. Blot out me, get rid of them. Go.
Wash me thoroughly from my
Wash me,
iniquity.
God. Every time those thoughts come back to my mind, God, wash me up. Clean me up. Let me walk away from that stuff. That even, you know how sometimes you wash yourself and you don't wash good?
Yep.
That's what David said. God don't have wash me, clean me all the way up. Go.
And cleanse me from my sin.
Cleanse me from sin. Cleanse me from what causes other people to laugh at me. Make people talk about me, God. Clean me up. Wash me. So when people do see me, they don't see my sin. Go.
For I acknowledge my transgression.
He said, God, I know what I've done. I know what I've done. Go.
And my sin is ever before me.
He said, no matter where I go, no matter what I do, I'm always going to know what I've done. Go.
Against thee only have I sinned.
Lord, I'm not worried about nobody else. I'm worried about you. Go.
And done this evil in thy sight.
He said, I did it and you were looking dead at me when I did it. Go.
That thou mightest be justified when thou speakest.
Lord, when you speak, what's going to happen to me? Please, Lord, please. Think about what you're going to say to me. What my consequences going to be for doing what I've done. Please, Lord, let the consequence not be that bad. Go.
And be clear when thou judgest.
And Lord, you know, remember, this is me, little old David, little shepherd boy. When you get ready to pass judgment on me, God, be easy on me, because you know I'm still going to come back and I'm going to ask for forgiveness. Go.
Behold, I was shaped in iniquity.
Because of how my mom and daddy got me here, I was shaped in iniquity. Two people that sin caused me to be here. Okay?
And in sin did my mother conceive me.
Okay? Go.
Behold, thou darest truth in the inward parts.
Lord, even on my insides, I want to do right. I want to do it, God. I want to do it like you say do it. But you know what, God? Sometimes the enemy don't act right. Even what Paul said.
Even when I have to decide.
Evil is always present.
Amen. Okay?
Wait a minute. Read, have you read verse 10?
No, I said 1 through 4.
Oh, well, read verse 10. And listen what verse 10 says.
Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me.
That's right. Create in me a clean heart and renew the right spirit in me.
Okay, you gonna make your comments now?
No,
Okay.
I'm good.
Elizabeth, come on.
Read the paper.